Today we'll talk about compound expressions in Julia, and more particularly we'll investigate what's the difference between the begin and the let statements. Okay, so let's define a compound expression as a simple sequence of statements. And the first one I want to talk about is the begin-end statement. And it allows us to write several lines of code as if it were only one single line. The nice thing about the begin-end statement is that it returns the last evaluated value. So what happens in our example here is that we declare A equals to 1, B equals to 2, and then we sum up the two, and the return value is assigned to the X variable. And what is nice is that all the variables that we declared inside the begin and end statement are available to the global scope. So we can have the value of A, the value of B, and also, of course, the value of X, that was the return value. And I know that your next question is probably, why are we even using begin and end statement when we can just write the code like this? A equals 1, B equals 2, and X equals A plus B. Well, mainly because it's a very simple example here. But for another example, we know that in the Pluto Notebook, we cannot write several statements inside the same cell. So for example, here, it will require either to split the two statements into two different cells or to wrap all the code in a begin-end block. So that's an example where using a begin and end statement is useful. And there are many more that we'll see in different videos. And the second nice compound expression that I want to talk about is the let end statement. And the nice thing about the let statement is that all variables declared inside the let statement are not accessible from outside. They are local variables. So for example, here we declare C equals 1, D equal 2, and then we sum up the two and put the result in Y. So the thing here is that Y is available to the user now because it's in the global scope. It's returned by the let statement, but the variables inside C and D are not available to the global scope. So if we want to use C, it tells that it's not defined. It returns an error. And we can test whether a variable is defined in the global scope using the @isDefined macro. So here it returns false for C and false for D, which are both variables declared in the let statement. And this property is really useful when you're computing a new variable based on temporary variables, but you don't want to pollute your global scope with those temporary variables. And another very useful thing about the let statement is that it lets us use outside variables, but without impacting their values if we change them. I know it's a little bit complicated to understand, so let's dig up into an example. So let's declare a Z outside the let statement. So it's in the global scope. Z equals 1. And if we want to use the global value Z inside the let statement, we have to pass it as an argument like this. So here, what we say to the let statement is that, okay, we want a local Z like this that is based on the global Z, and this is the global Z. So the value of Z local will be equal to the value of Z global. If I rename it, it will work. So what we do inside the let statement is that we update the value of Z local by incrementing by 1 and then returning the value. So res equals to 2. So the nice thing here is that if we rename everything just Z, it will also work. Why? Because what the let statement does is that it makes a local variable called Z that is based on the value of the global variable. And when we update the value of Z inside the let statement, it will update the value of the local variable without even touching the value of the global variable. So now the value of the global variable is still 1. We didn't change its value, and we changed the value of the local variable Z by incrementing it by 1. And that's all for today. Don't forget that this video is part of a playlist. Thank you for watching, and I see you next time.